The series begins in a small town in France. At this time, a girl named Camille appears. We see her riding the school bus, which suddenly has an accident and falls off the bridge. After some time, we see Camille coming out from under the bridge, looking scared. Meanwhile, we see Lena in a bar, getting upset when she sees her father with a woman named Lucy. It becomes apparent that they are in a relationship. After that, her father, whose name is Jerome, goes to a meeting held by a man named Pierre. A woman speaks, telling them that the gathering has helped her a lot since the accident and that she has decided to have another child. Camille arrives home, and her mother, Claire, hears the door. She thinks Lena has returned and is shocked when she comes downstairs to see Camille eating and apologizing for being late. Camille tells her something strange happened and appears to have forgotten the accident. Claire tries to make sure she is really seeing her daughter, listening to her taking a shower. She rushes into Camille's room and removes the candles in front of her picture, trying to put everything back in place. She then calls Jerome, asking him to come home quickly. At this time, Julie, a doctor, appears. A man named Costa calls her, sounding scared, and asks her to come to his house quickly to give him an injection. As soon as Julie leaves, a man named Simon arrives, knocking on Julie's apartment door, but no one answers except for her neighbor, Beatrice. Simon asks her about Adele, who appears to have lived there before Julie. Beatrice tells him she doesn't know that name. Jerome is shocked when he returns home and finds Camille there. Claire tells him that she doesn't remember anything. Camille is surprised to see her father smoking and tells them about what happened to her, saying it felt like she was in a coma. She then asks about her sister, Lena, and tries to call her colleague, Frédéric, but he doesn't answer because Lena has her phone. Julie is surprised when she goes to Costa's house and hears a noise. She tries to find the source, but Costa stops her, looking terrified because his wife, who died years ago, has come back and is eating in the kitchen. Julie leaves and sees a small child watching her, who then boards the bus with her. Simon goes to the bar to ask about Adele, but no one knows her except for Lena. Lena asks Simon to buy her a drink in exchange for telling him her address. Jerome is upset when he sees Pierre at the house, knowing that Claire called him to see Camille. Pierre is surprised to see her, and thinking he's a psychologist, she tells him she can't sleep. He reassures her and says he will prescribe something for her. Julie is surprised when she returns home and sees the small child in the garden, knocks on the door but doesn't speak or say his name. Julie is forced to lie to Beatrice, telling her that his name is Victor. He enters the house and starts eating. Lena goes out with Simon and accompanies him to Adele's house, explaining that she had been tutoring her for a while. Simon leaves her as soon as they arrive at the house. Adele is shocked when she sees him, thinking she is imagining things, and she breaks down, refusing to open the door for him. Simon is surprised when he hears a child calling Adele Mama. Julie decides to call the police, but changes her mind because of Victor's look. She agrees to let him stay in the house for just one day. Lucy leaves the bar after finishing work, and suddenly a man appears and attacks her, stabbing her until she dies. At this time, Lena returns home, and Camille hears her knocking on the wall between them. Lena is terrified when she sees her in front of her. Camille breaks down and starts screaming, but her mother intervenes and calms her down. Costa decides to set his house on fire after tying up his wife and escaping. Simon goes to his grave and learns that he died a long time ago. At the same time, staff notice that the water level has dropped significantly. They see Costa standing on a wall, and he throws himself off, committing suicide. We flash back 4 years, seeing Camille with her father, telling him she doesn't want to go on the trip, especially since Lena isn't going because she is sick. Turns out that the two are twins. Lena was pretending to be sick to spend the day with Frédéric, who we learn Camille loves, but he loves Lena. At this moment, Camille senses her sister, who is in a relationship with Frédéric. She struggles to breathe. She desperately wants to get off the bus, but suddenly sees Victor on the road, leading to the bus accident. We flash back 10 years and see Simon playing in the bar where Adele works. The band celebrates them because they are getting married. Simon sees Lena playing the instruments and stands beside her to teach her. Adele takes a picture of them. The next day, Adele wakes up to prepare for the wedding and tells Simon that she is pregnant. He is moved and cries with joy. Adele goes to the church, getting worried when Simon is late. She is horrified when the police arrive and inform her that he is dead. We return to the present, where Simon is in a restaurant trying to buy food with his money, but it has no value and he can't purchase anything. He begs the waiter for any sandwich because he is very hungry. Simon becomes angry when the waiter refuses and hits him. At that moment, Camille looks in the mirror and finds herself strange. She tries to get closer to Lena and tells her that she is scared, but Lena becomes even more frightened and distances herself. Julie goes to the police station to ask about Victor, but she finds nothing about him. She gets nervous when the officer says he will file a report and denies that Victor is with her, saying she saw him on the bus. Lena becomes tense when she sees Camille having breakfast with them and tells her parents that the person there is not her real sister, but an imposter. Camille feels hurt and asks her to put herself in her shoes. Jerome yells at Lena, who gets upset upset and leaves the house, telling her father that her sister is dead, will not come back. Simon goes to Julie's house and asks her about Adele. She tells him that Adele used to live there and that she doesn't know anything about her, and closes the door in his face. She talks to Victor, telling him she can't keep him, but is moved when he hugs her. Adele goes to the church with her husband Thomas, who is a police officer. That moment, gets the news of Lucy's murder, has to leave Adele in the church to return to the station. Meanwhile, the water level continues to drop. Camille enters her sister's room and gets upset when she sees a picture of her with Frederic. Claire asks Jerome to bring his clothes and come back home for the sake of their daughter. He agrees, bids her farewell, and leaves. Claire is shocked when she enters Lena's room and finds it messy. Camille denies doing anything. Julie is surprised when she learns from her neighbor that Costa committed suicide but is in a hurry and takes Victor and leaves. Simon returns to the bar. Lena is shocked when she sees a picture of herself with Simon as a child on the bar wall. Simon goes to the library and sees Adele, who tells him that she never forgot him, even though she got married, because he is a part of her. She knows he is a ghost, but she is not afraid of him, is very happy about his return. At that moment, the children enter. Simon leaves her. Finding the police waiting for him, they arrest him. Tony is surprised when he learns that Lucy was killed and is accused by a detective of her murder because he had been a suspect in a similar case. But Thomas takes her out, starts questioning Tony. At that time, we see the young man who killed Lucy returning home, calling for his mother. Julie is shocked when she sees Victor sitting on the windowsill, suddenly throwing himself off. She's even more terrified when she goes down to look for him, finds him standing in front of the building's door. Tony returns to his mother's house and finds a wolf standing in front of it, which suddenly attacks him, but Tony manages to kill it. He then buries it, but is shocked when he sees the young man who killed Lucy. The young man hits him on the head and runs away. Tony is terrified as he chases after him, pounding on the door. Suddenly, the noise quiets down, and as soon as Tony steps outside, he is struck on the head. Camille sneaks out behind her mother and goes to the bar. She is frightened when she sees her colleague who used to tease her and quickly runs away. Thomas is stunned when he interrogates Simon and confirms that he is indeed alive, that his wife was not imagining things. The young man who killed Lucy is shocked when he learns that his mother died 3 years ago and that he also died with her. Camille returns home and breaks down because her colleague did not recognize her, and she cries. Simon is imprisoned and eats the food the guard gives him, showing that he was very hungry. Julie goes to the bathroom after putting Victor to bed, feeling devastated. We see the scars on her body. We flash back 7 years and see Julie leaving a masquerade party. She refuses to stay with her friend, saying she will go home. She then enters a tunnel and is suddenly attacked by a man who stabs her multiple times. We return to the present, and Julie attends Costa's funeral, meeting her neighbor Beatrice, who tells her what happened to Lucy. Julie breaks down and leaves the funeral. At this time, Lena talks to Pierre and tells him she saw someone in the same condition as her sister. He is surprised and tells her he will look into it. Then Viviane, Costa's wife, appears, showing that she did not die in the fire. Later, Camille talks to her father and asks about his relationship with her mother. She tells him it seems they are separated because he sleeps outside. Her father explains that he became worse after the accident and that her mother couldn't handle it. Claire and Lena arrive, and Lena leaves them to go to her room. Camille follows her, and Lena becomes flustered when Camille asks about her relationship with Frederic. She denies it, saying there is nothing between them. At that moment, Camille notices the mark on her back, but Lena doesn't give her a chance and asks her to leave. The officer decides to release Simon from jail because there is no evidence against him and asks him not to leave town. He then calls Pierre, telling him he has a lost person with no place to go, and Pierre rushes over, especially when he learns it is Simon. Jerome tries to convince Claire that they should leave town so their daughter can go out and live her life normally. Afterward, Lena arrives at school, and she gets very upset when her father tells her they are moving. She gets out of the car and doesn't respond to Frederic. Victor goes into the bathroom to Julie and tells her that someone is knocking, which turns out to be Laurie, the investigator, who we learn is Julie's friend. Julie refuses to talk to her about anything because Laurie hasn't checked on her since the incident. At this time, Beatrice watches them talking. Pierre takes Simon from the prison, explaining that he helps lost people like him and can find him a place to stay, but Simon refuses and asks to be dropped off on the road. Claire is terrified when she finds a dead animal in the trash, and when she goes to Camille, she finds her trying on her sister's clothes. Claire suggests they go out to buy some new clothes. Thomas gets angry when he learns that Simon has been released from prison, goes to Pierre, asking about him. Pierre questions Thomas's interest in Simon, but Thomas threatens to consider Pierre an accomplice if he doesn't report Simon as soon as he sees him. Simon goes to the library to see Adele, who thinks she is the only one who can see him. She asks him to go out with her before he disappears. Julie is annoyed by her neighbor's interference when she threatens to call the police about her illegally adopting Victor. Simon is affected when he sees his daughter at school. At this time, Claire takes her daughter to the store to buy clothes, and they run into their neighbor. Claire becomes nervous, especially when Camille comes out of the fitting room, but she lies to the neighbor, saying Camille is Lena's cousin. Meanwhile, Lena goes to the bar and asks Tony about Simon. He knows nothing. Tony gets upset when he finds his brother in the bar, asking to work with him, but he refuses and tells him to go home and lock himself in. Julie leaves for work, and Victor takes the opportunity to go to Beatrice. Lena goes to Adele and asks about Simon, which makes Adele very anxious as she can't believe someone else can see Simon. Simon decides to go to Pierre and asks to stay with him for a couple of days. Julie returns home and doesn't find Victor. After a while, she hears a noise, grabs a pair of scissors, and goes out, imagining the person who stabbed her before is waiting for her. But it suddenly turns into Victor, who calms her down and takes the scissors from her. Camille decides to go to the bar and meets Frederick, tells him she is Lena's cousin. Lena is shocked when she sees her sister, but asks her to return home quickly. Camille feels hurt and leaves. Simon returns to Adele's house, and Thomas sees them hugging. Julie falls asleep on Victor's lap, while we see Beatrice murdered in her apartment with her cats gathered around her. We flash back 35 years and see Victor playing with his brother. He appears afraid to sleep due to nightmares. His mother allows him to come to her room if he has a nightmare. Victor wakes up startled by his brother's noise and hides in the closet, locking himself in. A masked man finds him because Victor urinates out of fear. The masked man reassures him, asking him to think of something happy and sing a song. Another masked man enters, finds Victor, shoots him dead. We return to the present and see Victor waking up startled, and Julie hugs and comforts him. Julie then hears a noise and is shocked to see Beatrice murdered. Claire talks to Jerome, agreeing to move out of the house. At that moment, the police arrive and ask Jerome to come to the station. Thomas sees his wife hiding Simon in the house, bringing him food after their daughter goes to school. Simon tells Claire that they will stay at Pierre's shelter until he finds a job. They will take their daughter with them. Lena wakes up in pain, terrified to see her back wound worsening, and faints in front of her mother and sister. The police arrive at Beatrice's house, and Thomas asks Lori to question Julie, who doesn't want to let her in because Victor is hiding in the room. Victor becomes frightened when he suddenly hears the voice of the person who killed him and runs out of the room. Lori is shocked when she sees him, and Julie begs her not to speak, explaining that no one is looking for him. Lori is confused, but eventually agrees. Claire calls Pierre and asks him to come to the hospital. Simon is moved when he enters his daughter's room and finds she has drawn a picture of him. Camille feels responsible for what happened to her sister, thinking the scar appeared when she returned. Pierre talks to her, asking her not to feel guilty because she has returned to her rightful place. Pierre reassures Camille that she can continue her life normally and that her sister is surely happy she is back, just needs time. Camille decides to go to school and meets Frederick, then goes to the bar with him. Meanwhile, the water level drops significantly, and the engineers try to understand the cause, refusing to inform the police to avoid alarming the residents. Lena is in a lot of pain, and the doctor tries to determine the cause of the wound, asking if she had been injured there before. Claire is surprised when Lena tells the doctor she was injured a year ago and that she knows nothing about it. The police interrogate Jerome about his relationship with Lucy, and he denies any involvement. The officer accuses Jerome of assaulting his daughter a year ago, hitting her and injuring her face. At the time, she didn't report it to the police, but the doctor who treated her confessed. Jerome is flustered and unable to respond. Adele's daughter returns from school and discovers cameras in her room. Adele is equally shocked when she sees them. Lori returns to Julie and tells her she can't cover for her and will have to take Victor. At the same time, Julie is stunned when she sees Victor's drawings, which depict Beatrice's murder. Adele's daughter discovers her real father hiding in the house. She recognizes him and asks if he is an angel and about heaven. Simon tells her that he used to see her from heaven. Adele asks her daughter not to tell anyone, especially Thomas. The officer calls Pierre and informs him about what Jerome did to Lena. Pierre seizes the opportunity to call Claire and tell her what happened. She gets furious with Jerome and kicks him out of the house, refusing to listen to his attempts to defend himself. The police are monitoring Simon, but they can't catch him because the power goes out in the whole town. At this moment, Lena feels her sister and leaves the hospital, heading to the bar. Adele confronts Thomas with the truth, and he tells her he was watching her to ensure she was safe. Adele is shocked when he reveals that the priest didn't tell her the real reason for Simon's death, that Simon didn't die in an accident. Lena arrives at the bar, furious at her sister, wanting to expose her as Camille, but no one believes her. Julie is relieved to learn that Beatrice committed suicide, that Victor didn't kill her. Victor arrives at the shelter and is surprised when Pierre asks him to think of something happy, sing a reassuring song. Lena leaves the bar unable to walk properly and collapses in the tunnel. Tony's brother sees her. We flash back 7 years to see Tony leaving the house, yelling at his mother for letting his brother Serge out. Serge is standing in front of the tunnel when Julie appears, and Serge stabs her and starts eating her flesh. Tony intervenes, hitting Serge on the head, and takes Julie and his brother in the car. When they arrive, Tony buries Serge, who begs to be spared, but Tony insists and continues covering him with dirt. Returning to the present, Serge is sitting next to Lena after taking her to his house. He controls himself and refrains from approaching her wound. This time, Frederick calls Lena's phone, but Serge breaks it. Camille walks with Frederick to his house, but he doesn't invite her in. Pierre is shocked to learn that Victor escaped with a woman from the shelter, who turns out to be Viviane, Costa's wife. Victor appears scared, but Viviane reassures him that no one can hurt them anymore. Adele goes to work and explains to the students in the library about the submerged church under the lake, saying it might appear if the water level drops. Adele imagines her daughter asking why Simon committed suicide. At this time, we see the divers searching for the reason behind the drop in the water level. They are shocked to find many drowned animals. Camille is upset when she learns from her mother that her sister was in a relationship with Frederick. Serge becomes nervous when he hears his brother's car, locks the door on Lena. He lies to Tony, telling him that their mother came back from the dead. Tony gets terrified and quickly runs away. Thomas learns that Adele's daughter saw Simon, asks her to tell him if she sees him again. Laurie visits Julie and asks about Victor because he is missing. Julie angrily tells her that she won't report him even if he comes back. Simon goes with Pierre to Claire's place because the police are looking for him. Claire asks Camille to stay with him since he is going through the same situation as her. Camille tells Simon she's sure his lover didn't wait for him like hers did. Simon asks her for a favor, and Camille agrees, saying the dead must help each other. At that moment, Lena wakes up, and Serge grinds herbs for her wound, but he can't control himself. He suddenly stands up and tells her he'll prepare breakfast. Julie goes to the station after the police arrest Viviane. She talks to Viviane and believes she really died because she saw her picture at Costa's. Viviane tells her that Victor died many years ago, reassures her that he will return after completing his mission. Julie suspects that she too might have been dead, and asks Viviane how she can be sure. Viviane says there is only one way to find out. Meanwhile, Camille goes to Adele and asks her to meet Simon at the bus station at night so they can escape with their daughter. Adele refuses, saying she won't go. Camille asks her to do the right thing, telling her that Simon loves her very much. Thomas meets the coroner and learns that the animals died recently and had no toxins in their bodies. It's possible they were scared of something and ran into the lake. Serge is in the forest, killing a deer to eat. Jerome visits Lucy in the hospital and is surprised to find that all the damaged tissues are healing and her stomach wounds are improving, even though everyone expected her to die. Claire calls Jerome, who tells her he's going to the bar to look for Lena. As soon as he arrives, he sees Camille close to Frederick. He gets angry, grabs her, and walks away. Julie attempts to commit suicide to confirm if she is dead or not, but Laurie stops her just in time. Laurie then apologizes to Julie for what happened to Victor, who is at the shelter with Pierre. Victor tells Pierre that he killed him and his family. Pierre is terrified and says he tried to protect him, but Victor doesn't believe him. Suddenly, the power goes out, and the person who killed Victor and his family appears. Pierre fights him off. Julie arrives and hugs Victor, telling him not to be afraid. Tony confesses to his brother that he was the one who killed him. He surrenders when Serge points a gun at him, but Serge can't bring himself to shoot. Unable to forgive his brother, Serge walks away. Simon arrives at Adele's house, and their daughter calls Thomas to inform him. She talks to Simon, telling him they won't run away with him because he chose death over them. Now he is dead. Simon leaves and is confronted by Thomas, who shoots him. Frederick goes to Camille, learns the truth, and leaves her, which causes Camille to break down and cry to her mother. The nurse treats Lucy's wound. Suddenly, Lucy wakes up and grabs her hand. We flash back a year and see Lucy on her way to the town. The first thing she does is go to Tony's bar and ask him for a job. She sees Jerome drunk. Tony tells her that his daughter died in an accident. Lucy gets to know Jerome and enters into a relationship with him. It turns out she has a connection with spirits, as she can see and talk to Camille while being with Jerome. Back in the present, Lucy wakes up from her coma. The doctor is astonished because she remembers everything, tells her it's a miracle. The power cuts off in the entire town. At this time, Frederick goes to Camille's grave and is shocked to find the coffin filled with water and no body inside. The next day, Pierre meets with the parents who lost their children in the accident, informing them that Camille has returned. He tells them what they are witnessing is beyond human comprehension. The mother of one of the students is upset when she sees Camille and asks why she returned alone. Camille feels hurt, goes to her room, and Pierre follows her. She tells him that everyone, including her sister, sees her as a monster. Pierre tells her that she is selfish and doesn't realize that she is a miracle, but she hasn't done anything with it. He asks her to give people hope and control their minds. Thomas arrives home the next day after killing Simon and asks Adele's daughter not to tell anyone what happened because no one would believe her. He says it should remain their secret. He reassures Adele, telling her that Simon won't come back, that he will always be there for her. The officer guarding Lucy comes in, surprised when she calls him by his name. Lucy lies, saying he told her his name when he entered. Victor returns to Julie and refuses her protection. After she leaves, he lifts his clothes, revealing his burned hands. Thomas goes into the cell with Frederick and his friend, shocked when they tell him that their friend didn't die and came back to life, which is why they were digging up her grave. Camille listens to Pierre's words and lies to the parents, telling them she communicated with their children's spirits. Julie asks Victor why he chose her, and he says his mother told him he would meet a fairy who would keep him safe until she returned. When he saw Julie, he knew she was the fairy. Julie is moved when he hugs her. Laurie visits them and offers to stay with Julie due to the power outage, but Julie declines because Laurie doesn't like children. Jerome returns home and is upset to see Pierre, tries to explain to Claire that Pierre is deceiving her. At that moment, Thomas knocks on the door, asking about Jerome's niece, who is Camille. Claire lies, saying she is out, but Thomas insists she come to the station and bring her ID. Lucy sits with the officer who was guarding her and describes her attacker, helping them create a composite sketch. Meanwhile, Lena asks Serge for clothes, and he sees a knife in front of him, struggling to control himself. The police visit Tony, show him a picture of his brother, and ask him to report if he sees him. Tony gets scared and goes to Serge's house. He sees Lena's back and thinks she is his mother. He knocks on the door and asks her to let him in. Lena is shocked when she hears him talking about his brother and saying he was sick. At that moment, Serge arrives, and Tony takes the weapon from him, saying he will protect him and their mother. Serge searches for Lena until he finds her hiding. Terrified, she asks him if he is dead, but Serge calms her down and takes the knife from her. Julie becomes anxious when Pierre comes to her house and asks her to hand over Victor, saying she is putting him in danger and that he would be safe with him. Julie refuses. Meanwhile, Simon wakes up in the morgue, puts on his clothes, and leaves. He meets Lucy, who takes his hand, and they walk together. Police learn that Serge is Tony's brother and has been missing for 10 years. Laurie arrives at the house and finds Julie and Victor there. Julie tells her she accepted her invitation. The police arrive at Pierre's house, where he and Lena see them, but Tony doesn't let them in. He threatens them with a gun and tells them to leave. At the same time, Serge brings Lena out. Thomas finds out that Simon escaped and calls Adele to inform her. We flash back a year and see Thomas returning home with Adele's daughter, who finds her mother has committed suicide in the bathroom. Her daughter is terrified when she sees Thomas saving her. Returning to the present, Lena comes home and is frightened by a noise, but relieved when she finds her father and hugs him, saying she was scared they had moved and left her. Pierre dreams of Victor waking him up and asking him to go to the lake. Pierre wakes up startled and finds Claire in front of him, very worried about Lena. Pierre takes her to the storage room and shows her the preparations he has made. Claire is surprised to see the weapons, and Pierre tells her he wants to protect Camille and all those who have returned because he believes their return signifies the end of the world. Julie wakes up and talks to Laurie, expressing her suspicion that she also died and came back, feeling like she isn't really alive. Laurie comforts and hugs her. Simon wakes up and is startled to find Lucy beside him. She convinces him to stay with her, saying he is dead, no longer belongs with Adele. Simon tells her he doesn't need to hear what she is saying and leaves. Camille has breakfast with Vivian and asks her why she died. Vivian lies, saying she died of hunger. Camille realizes that Vivian is lying to her and is shocked when Vivian tells her she is also lying and asks her to go to the storage room. Camille breaks down when she sees her classmates' parents, who have committed suicide because she lied to them, giving them false hope that their son was waiting for them. Julie is surprised to see Victor standing with Adele's daughter, who asks him to play with her. Julie talks to Adele, revealing that they were friends in the past, and tells her that Simon came to her house asking about her. Serge and Tony try to escape through the forest, but discover they keep ending up in the same place. Serge asks his brother to wait while he finds a way out. Tony imagines seeing their mother walking in the forest and calls out to her, but she suddenly disappears. Victor plays with Adele's daughter, who confesses that her father came back from the dead for her. She is shocked when Victor tells her that he also came back from the dead and asks her to look ahead. She is terrified when she sees her mother with her wrists cut and faints immediately. Lena returns to the shelter and hugs her sister, saying she missed her. Simon goes to the church and talks to the priest, who seems to know him from childhood. Simon asks if he thinks it's possible that he committed suicide, but suddenly the police arrive and arrest him. Simon realizes the priest reported him and spits on him before leaving. Serge asks his brother to cross the lake to get out of the forest. Tony gets tired of swimming and wants to go back, but Serge suddenly disappears into the water. Camille tells her sister what happened with Frederick, admitting she got close to him to annoy Lena because she couldn't accept her return. Lena reassures her that she is her sister, won't let anyone say otherwise. Pierre is upset when he sees Claire getting close to Jerome and hugging him. Lena notices Camille's face is decaying, tries to cover it with makeup. At the same time, Julie sees Victor's hand and is shocked to find out he is also decaying. Thomas asks Laurie to bring Victor to the station after learning that Adele's daughter fainted while playing with him, that Julie found him some time ago without knowing who his parents are. Laurie returns home and Julie asks her to take them away quickly. Laurie agrees and escapes with them, telling Julie she is tired, doesn't want to work in the police anymore. Adele is shocked when her daughter asks why she committed suicide, saying she saw her. Meanwhile, Simon discovers his stomach is starting to decay. He then sits with Thomas, who tells him he won't allow him to get close to his wife and daughter again. Julie becomes anxious when she realizes they keep ending up in the same place and can't leave the town. At the same time, Lucy sees many people returning from the dead and smiles at them. We flash back 35 years to the day the dam burst and see Victor walking past the dead. Suddenly, Serge and Tony appear, and they look as old as Victor. His mother calls out to him, asking him to stay with his brother. Then Viviane speaks, saying the dead will come back and take revenge. Back in the present, Julie and Laurie wake up and are startled to see handprints on the car windows. They become worried when Victor tells them he saw who did it and that they want him to go with them. Suddenly, Tony appears, standing on the dam, ready to commit suicide. Julie reaches him in time and grabs his hand. Laurie raises her weapon at him because Tony fired at the police. Adele enters her daughter's room and is shocked to see her drawings. Her daughter tells her she wants to see Simon, but Adele refuses, yells at her, and locks her in the room. Claire tries to talk to a woman whose daughter died in the accident. The woman is upset with Camille and Viviane, wanting them to leave the shelter because she believes they are the reason for their suffering. Pierre calms her down, saying no one will leave. Julie learns that Tony saved her and thanks him with a hug. At that moment, the people returning from the dead arrive, frightening Julie. She gets into the car with Victor, Tony, and Laurie. Meanwhile, Thomas goes to the bar and sees a man drinking water from the bathroom. He shoots and kills him. Camille talks to her sister, feeling guilty and saying she is putting them in danger. Lena reassures her, saying she is sure Camille isn't a threat. Jerome discovers that Pierre is hiding weapons in the storage room and tries to warn Claire, asking her to escape with their children, but she refuses, saying Camille won't be safe. Julie is annoyed with Laurie for wanting to arrest Victor, leading to an argument. She gets out of the car. Tony talks to Victor, telling him he remembers him and attended his and his brother's funeral. Victor reveals that Tony killed his brother Serge and that their mother died of grief because of him. Tony is shocked, and Victor hands him a gun, urging him to kill himself. Julie is terrified when she hears the gunshot and tries to save Tony. Thomas finds out that Simon escaped from jail and immediately goes to Adele's house and takes his daughter. She breaks down, especially when Simon tells her she is pregnant with his child. Adele grabs a knife and stabs Simon. Lucy calms Simon down and asks him to leave. Julie arrives at the shelter to save Tony and remove the bullet. Camille is frightened when she looks in the mirror and sees her face decay. Frederick enters. She asks if he really loved her. He says he did, which makes Camille happy, but Lena comes in and asks Frederick to leave. Thomas returns home and finds out Simon took his daughter, goes to the shelter and demands that Pierre let him in, saying he is putting everyone in danger. At that moment, a police officer tells him he saw a large number of people who came back from the dead. Viviane asks Victor to lie on her lap, and he remembers his mother telling him about the fairy who would help him and that he would recognize her when he saw her. Meanwhile, Julie finishes the surgery and is shocked to see Serge, thinking she is hallucinating. But Tony grabs Serge's hand and dies immediately after. Julie tries to save him, but fails. Serge collapses, hugging her, but she is scared and pushes him away. All the residents gather at the shelter, and then the people who returned from the dead arrive, with Lucy standing at the front. She demands that Thomas return the dead people in the shelter in exchange for bringing back Adele's daughter. Thomas agrees and releases Viviane. Julie is devastated and refuses to leave Victor, telling Thomas she will go with him. She ignores Laurie's pleas and leaves. Claire decides to leave with Camille as well. Thomas takes his daughter and is shocked when Lucy tells him they need Adele. He refuses, takes his daughter, and asks Pierre to close the shelter. Adele is horrified when Lucy tells her the returning dead want her because of the child she is carrying. The residents are terrified when they hear gunfire. The next day, they leave the shelter and find that the police and the returning dead have disappeared. Town is flooded.